as the star of the Midwest and in the top tier nationally. But it's not true about education, and it's not true yet about health care costs. On the education front, we need to be strengthened from top to bottom, but among other things, I proposed bringing more dollars and discipline into the classrooms of this state, dollars to come principally from more efficient spending. We've increased education spending every year the last 4, but there's a huge opportunity beyond when we notice that only 61 cents the education dollar actually makes it to the classroom. More discipline in our classrooms, assuring Indiana high school grads that they can go to college and that we will see to it. And on the health care front, continuing to broaden health insurance coverage and finding ways to make certain that this cost comes down to the level of taxes, utilities, and the cost of government, where right now Indiana is the most competitive state anywhere near us.
Ms. Long-Thompson.
Since we're in Northwest Indiana, I would like to make a statement about the flood this weekend. I happened to be here on Sunday during the flooding and have talked with a number of officials over the last couple of days and want to commend emergency workers and citizens who really rose to the occasion these last several days, and also make it clear that those of you who lost family and friends, that my husband and me, our hearts go out to you. Regarding the question, I believe the number one issue facing the state of Indiana is our economy. And Governor Daniels would have you believe that everything is going pretty well here in Indiana and that we are somehow doing better than our neighboring states. Well, he needs a reality check. In fact, we are losing jobs faster than any other state in the United States. We're losing jobs faster than Illinois, than Michigan, Ohio, Kentucky. Hoosiers make about 88 cents on the dollar relative to the rest of the country. I have served as Undersecretary for Rural Development at the Department of Agriculture, where I've created thousands of jobs. I have put forth a plan that has received recognition from leading newspapers around the state. My plan will create good-paying jobs, and my plan will also make health insurance affordable, and it will help us to increase our high school graduation rate. I think the choice is pretty clear. 4 more years of job loss and income loss, or new leadership that brings the kind of change that Indiana needs for creating jobs well into the future.
Thank you. And Mr. Horning, the most important issue of the next 4 years.
Well, actually, it's the most important issue that faces any nation at any time, and that is, who are you and what are you all about, whether you trust politicians or whether you believe in freedom. And I think this nation proved more than any other that freedom actually works, and that the corollary to "in God we trust" is that in politicians we do not. And I'm afraid that what we have done is kind of, we've entrusted politicians with everything. And I suppose the big issue is, do we want to continue in that direction? Do we want to put more and more power into political hands and in their funding mechanisms and in the lobbyists and lawyers and all of the things we say we hate about politics? Or do we want to be free people where we're more self-reliant and where we keep our politicians on a leash? I'm here for really one reason, and that's to put the Constitution of Indiana and the United States of America on the ballot. And you can choose whether you want the constitutions as written, and that's as they were intended, you know. No debating the meaning of the word "is," or whether we want to keep doing what we've been doing. And we know the history of that is not very good. When you put politicians in ever more power into fewer and fewer hands, the result has never been good. So basically, I'm here just for one thing: put a leash on politicians and let you be free.
Thank you. In our second question, we're going to begin with Ms. Long-Thompson. Arlene Nunez, a state employee from East Chicago, is concerned about...
Excuse me, do we have a rebuttal for each
I apologize.
question?
You are correct. I was jumping ahead of myself there. Let's begin with Mr. Daniels, and we have 45 seconds for the rebuttal. Thank you. Okay.
Well, let's agree that our economy isn't nearly what we want it to be. In the last 3 months, we've suffered a very specific hit in the RV industry, thanks to $5 diesel and credit markets that seized up. But CNBC named us the most improved economy in the country for a reason. We've been number one in everybody's ranking among Midwest states. We have added jobs, not lost jobs over the last few years. And we do have the lowest unemployment in the Midwest. Those are matters of simple fact. Ms. Thompson's plan, we like to look at all new ideas, and I looked at this one. It's been described actually by the newspapers of the state as vague, and for good reason. It's expensive, it amounts to corporate welfare, and it favors, strangely enough, the parts of the state that are doing very, very well right now.
Thank you. 45 seconds, Ms. Long-Thompson.
Well, I think that the fact that we've lost 60,000 jobs just since last summer, and the number one question Hoosiers have when they log on to the state's website is how do they access unemployment insurance? And maybe if Governor Daniels were not spending so much time flying around in the state airplane at taxpayer expense, flying back from his vacation home in West Virginia, he'd have a better sense of how difficult it is for many Hoosier families. My plan is a good plan. It doesn't cost taxpayers anything, but it will create good paying jobs.
Mr. Horning.
I think maybe you better put my podium in between these two. Actually, politicians will differ on things, and that's fine. That's what we want. But I guess what I want to make sure that happens is that when politicians differ about your life, it doesn't really matter that much, that we should be more self-directed, and we should trust less in politicians in their constant bickering.
Our second question then, and Ms. Long-Thompson, Arlene Nunez, a state employee from East Chicago, is concerned about privatization. She notes that during Governor Daniels' time in office, several state services have been privatized. Ms. Nunez asks, what efforts will you take to continue or to stop these actions?
Well, interestingly, when Governor Daniels was running for office 4 years ago, he said that he wouldn't privatize, and if there was any contracting to be done in the private sector, that the contracts would go to state businesses. But nothing could be further from the truth in how he's actually conducted business. I believe the privatization of the toll road was a major mistake. I also believe the privatization of the prison at Newcastle was a mistake characterized by the riot that occurred, and we know that privatizing our FSSA programs has been disastrous. Not only has it hurt families in need, but it's not saving the state any money. I have a long history of knowing how to address problems. I'm very fortunate. I have an MBA and a PhD in business from Indiana University. And at my time at the United States Department of Agriculture, I had a particular program that wasn't working very well, and I had a choice between privatizing it or fixing it. I chose to fix it. And if I am honored to serve our great state as governor, I will fix the privatization problems that have been created by Governor Daniels, and I will certainly stop the rampant privatization that has been a major characteristic of his time as governor.
Mr. Horning.
Privatization has been a misused term in my way of looking at this, and that we should really decide whether government has a business doing something or not. And generally speaking, I look at government as well as the sword of state. It's an armed force. It inherently does things with violence, and we have to be careful how we unleash that. I am all for getting rid of things completely out of government that don't belong there. But to have some sort of hybridized look at this, where it's kind of government and it's kind of not, that really makes no sense to me. And we should really decide what things we should keep in government's purview, where it is necessary to use the jails and police officers and so on, the inherent violence of government, or whether we turn it over completely to the free market, where all transactions are voluntary and where nobody's forced to do anything. I believe very strongly, in fact, that one of the key problems that's facing us right now is that we can't decide what our government is and what it is not. And I'm very insistent on the idea that government is a very dangerous tool. It's kind of like a junkyard dog. You want to keep it in the junkyard. So when we privatize something, in my way of looking at it, that means hands off. We're out of the business and we leave it to the experts.
Mr. Daniels, privatization.
You're either for taxpayers or you're not. We view every service of government from a very practical standpoint. What's the best way to deliver it? What's the lowest cost to taxpayers? So when we believe, as in the case of the state police or gaming enforcement or the protection of children, that growing the workforce of government is the correct way to approach it, we have done that. But in other cases where we find that we can deliver equal or better service at lower cost to taxpayers, we do that. Prison food,